the battle of your supporters and your haters, and they remain relatively constant. We got the Godfather streaming, Luke Ford. Let's see what he's talking about
Hallelujah!
of the ethos.
Blessings.
Is this the first time you had Luke grace your channel, Stephen?
This is the first time, yeah.
Well, in
Thank you for
honor of
coming,
the
Luke.
Godfather of streaming, we should just you should just hand over the platform to Luke.
Luke, we bow before you. Grace
Well,
us
God
with your
forbid,
words.
God forbid, Luke is a God-fearing Jew and has no desire for you to bow before him, but wants you to bow before Hashem.
True. Luke, thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, can I still do the chant?
Amazing. Of course, Dooovid. That's what we're here for. That's what we're all waiting for. Dooovid has a special chant for us to get us underway, everybody.
Okay, and this is one of the chants they were doing at the Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, rally in Grand Central that I heard was one of the biggest acts of public disobedience in the United States in 20 years. Isaiah 2:4, and he shall judge among the nations, and he shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So the chant is just the last sentence. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Nation shall they learn war no more. And the word for nation is goy. Lo yisa goy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu oid milchama. Lo yisa goy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu oid milchama. Lo yisa goy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu oid milchama. Loy yisa goy el goy cherev. Loy yilmadu oid milchama.
Amen.
That verse is actually outside of the
Amazing.
UN, so that's one of the verses. They have a few like multicultural different faiths, but that's the Jewish verse that's enshrined outside the United Nations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, dude. And that you said that meant what?
Nation shall no longer lift sword up against nation and learn war no more. We'll turn the sword
Wow.
into the plowshare and the
Yes.
spear into the pruning hook. And kind of the I was talking last night with on my Twitter space about the third temple, and if we get Aaron, joins us from Israel, the messianic visions of the third temple of the messianic era that are generally positive, not like the ones that the JQ people pick on, but the concept that will all the nations will stand shoulder to shoulder, the universal brotherhood of man. The temple is the house of prayer to all nations, in some sort of like paradigm shift, mass enlightenment, where all humans could get along together and serve God in righteousness.
Yeah, I've heard that there's a clip of one of the Israeli prime ministers who's called Begin Menachem, and he quoted that quote at some famous point. I've heard him saying it. I remember that from somewhere.
Menachem Begin, you mean?
That could be it. Yes. Pardon the pronunciation there. Yeah. But I've heard it before, so yeah. Cool. Very cool.
Well, Luke,
All right,
Stephen
so-
was mentioning he was surprised you're not streaming all the time with the war going on, and I was suggesting that the narrative's quite difficult to be a Jewish streamer because you're probably expected as a Jew to put out kind of untenable hasbara that isn't necessarily your belief, that they want you to put out that the Israeli army and the Jews are the most ethical and honest people on the planet, and while advocating for ethnic cleansing at the same time, as where Luke may toe the party line. Generally, he'll do it in an amoral fashion without saying we're the good guys, but just, well, I'm on Team Jew, and I understand that that's how they feel. But it's probably hard to be a Jewish streamer in the current environment, and maybe that's why you're not trying to you get the extra viewership or interviews that may be possible during this time of interest in the subject.
Yeah, I get these temporary bouts of humility where I just stand before events and I just don't want to give any opinions about them. I was horrified by October 7, and now we've got this widening conflict in the Middle East with the possibility of contagion and conflagration. And I mean, I don't have any 5-point plan for how Israel should react. But one thing I was thinking about today, I was listening to political scientist John J. Mearsheimer, and he was speaking on why Russia went to war against Ukraine on February 4, 2022, saying that Russia had come to see Ukraine joining NATO as an existential threat. So even though it violated international law, and even though it violated just war theory, any leader and any nation and its people are going to go to war if they perceive an existential threat. And Mearsheimer was talking about how Putin was seeing things and how Russians are seeing things. And he noted that Putin gets a lot of criticism in Russia, but all the criticism is for not waging war severely enough. And I was just transposing that to the situation in Israel. I think the overwhelming majority of Israelis see Hamas as an existential threat, and international pressure and UN condemnations and whatever just war theory or whatever international law says, any nation that sees an existential threat to its existence, particularly on its border, is going to go to war. I don't know any nation who would react in a particularly restrained manner following the massacre of 1,400 of its citizens. So I don't expect Israel to behave in a particularly restrained manner with regard to Hamas. And at the same time, I understand that will mean thousands of civilian deaths in Gaza, which will understandably horrify people.
Yeah, well, people probably underestimate it because of, God forbid, the brutality and the sheer number. And presumably you're running with a modern Orthodox crowd who is, if not the most hawkish militarily of any of the Jewish segments, up there with the most hawkish. But the numbers would appear to be that there's 30 to plus thousand Hamas militants that have remained in northern Gaza, and they basically, Israel's declared war, death warrant, expulsion, complete surrender. So it's not thousands. I mean, it's like Israel right now, the basis is without even any thoughts about are they going to try for an expulsion or anything else, but they plan on killing 30,000 militants, and the civilian casualty caught along with that, plus the likelihood of severe losses among the Israelis, that at this point you're looking probably at least 50,000 casualties.
Yeah, now there's a misunderstanding in the chat. Jay Walker says, don't the 10 commandments contain a commandment, do not kill? And the commandment is not do not kill, it's do not murder. So the Torah understands the difference between killing and murder. Killing is taking a life, murder is deliberately taking an innocent life. So if you are in an existential fight for your survival, and in the process of trying to ensure your own survival and to go at the enemy, and the enemy deliberately surrounds himself with civilians, you're not committing murder if you trying to kill the enemy unintentionally kill civilians. Just like if you eat non-kosher food, but you have every reason to believe that the food was kosher, you're not committing a sin. And so Israel has done as much as any nation, of which I'm aware, to try to minimize civilian casualties. I mean, Israelis wish that Hamas would have given a warning to Israeli civilians that they should flee the Israeli south to avoid being slaughtered. So, I mean, Israel's gone, above and beyond to try to warn civilians in northern Gaza that they should flee. But in the final analysis, any nation is going to fight to the death against an existential threat. And Israel has every reason to believe that Hamas is an existential threat.
the rabbis, clearly signed off. At this point, the Orthodox, Haredi are part of the coalition. So, for example, the hospital that I'm not sure if they've completely targeted, and I forget the name, if it's the Philippine hospital or one of these other hospitals that they showed documentation that they believe Hamas has headquarters there in tunnels underneath, even though there could be as many as 14,000 civilians there, that there was a letter signed by 45 leading Israeli rabbis that not only that they allowed to, but it's imperative to bomb the hospital. And like Secretary Blinken says, probably from Judeo sources, it's not only a right to defend yourself in Judaism, it's an obligation to defend yourself. So, like, someone comes to kill you, it's not just that you have the right to kill them in self-defense; you're required to kill them in self-defense. And the majority of the rabbis, especially in Israel, but probably the modern Orthodox, have also included in that the collateral civilian casualties.
And the situation is complicated because the incentives for a political leader are not necessarily identical to the incentives of the nation state. So George W. Bush, after 9/11, had all sorts of political incentives to wage, wars of conquest and bloody revenge after 9/11 that were good for him politically, at least in the 2002 elections and possibly even in the 2004 elections. But the way the United States pursued revenge after 9/11 proved to be disastrous for the United States. So even though you may be convinced that Al-Qaeda or Afghanistan or Iraq or Hamas are an existential threat, it doesn't mean that you're correct, and it doesn't mean that everything that you do to try to liquidate that existential threat is actually going to be in your best interest. So Bibi Netanyahu is operating under very different incentives than Israel. Like Bibi Netanyahu has been thoroughly disgraced by the October 7 massacre, and now he has all these political incentives to wage, a brutal war in Gaza, and that may not be the same as what's in Israel's best interest.
Well, there's also the dichotomy of. Well,
looking pretty bad for the
Go
northern
ahead,
Gazans.
Yeah,
I
go
was just
ahead,
going to say
Stephen.
it's looking pretty bad for the northern Gazans, isn't it? Those who've remained behind. If you look on the screen, the tactic which seems to have caught everybody off guard, and maybe a smart tactic, is that they've cut into Gaza, into the middle, and they're then going to kind of like a pincer move and just close in from both sides probably. And so anybody who remains there, to use your phrase, God forbid, what will happen to them?
Well, they're estimating that it's about 300,000 to 400,000 people, including, or possibly in addition to 30 to 40,000 Hamas militants, warriors. So, from the Israeli perspective, all of those 30 or 40,000 Hamas warriors must be eliminated, and the battle will not be over till they're all eliminated. And the other people had their chance to leave, and God forbid at this point they die. That's their own fault. And the United States so far has backed that. Secretary Blinken, we'll ask Luke in a second that if he's surprised about Blinken's hawkishness, but Blinken's going to Israel tomorrow, or I think he's already boarded the plane to go there, and he will sit in the Israeli War Cabinet meeting. President Biden, when he was in Israel, sat in actually the War Cabinet meeting of Israel, and it was just revealed that there was like
Blinken's going to Israel tomorrow.
a U.S. secretary base, like 504 in Israel on the border. So not only the military bases, but there was actually a U.S. military base that was just outside of Gaza also. And we got our man on the ground.
We've got
He
Aaron
still has the boomer
Amihud.
tech and needs to mute his stream, but welcome.
He does.
Welcome our old friend, half Jew on the scenes in Jerusalem.
Yeah, so I was very conscious, right? When you and I, David, have been doing these streams now for a couple of weeks, and I was very conscious of perhaps pushing too much of a dissident line, and I wanted to get somebody on the ground who was in Israel to give us their perspective, so that we have a double perspective now. Hopefully his boomer tech is functioning, but we could hear an echo, so I'll unmute you, dude, and let's see if we've got this figured out.
Aaron, blessings.
I think he needs to unmute himself. He's muted himself.
Well, while we wait for Aaron to unmute, I was shocked that Joe Biden visited Israel at a time of war. I mean, absolutely unprecedented for an American president to do this, and to intervene in such a dramatic and public way seems like an own goal. The interests of Israel and the interests of the United States are not identical. There are significant differences in the interests of the two countries, and I just think it was a massive mistake for President Joe Biden to go visit Israel. I just don't think that it's in America's interest to be making all sorts of proclamations about this fight between Israel and Hamas. It's no interest of America to make this a proxy fight. It's definitely in the interest of Russia to get America mired in the Middle East. And it's definitely in the interest of China to have America mired in the Middle East. But America's primary strategic interests are with regard to Taiwan and the rise of China. They have very little to do with Ukraine and very little to do with the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Well, what about Blinken's comment when he went there? Like, I not only come to you as the Secretary of State, but I come as a Jew. And I think it was today's New York Times. I mean, I've been reading all their articles on this and multiple papers, that there was like a huge dissonance in the Defense Department's Department of State, where there was like a conference call of like 1,000 employees about the humanitarian disaster and displeasement with the U.S. cooperation with Israel. But Blinken is basically just going gung-ho against his own advisors. And I would guess that Biden will probably go with Israel, possibly all the way, even against the better advisement of his own personnel, unless like Blinken gets forced to resign. And I'm not sure if you read that article about the what's happening in the State Department, the supposedly ignoring all the warnings from the advisories.
No, I haven't, but I think that's disastrous. I mean, when I do all sorts of jobs, I do not do them as a Jew. I do them as someone who's hired and paid to do a particular task. The Secretary of State is hired and paid.
He's roboting
to do the task of representing the best interests of the United States. Okay, we got
The
bigger.
internet is wrong.
Okay, so Aaron, if you can hear us, if you're hearing
Give it a
roboting, then
minute,
that's
let's
on
see.
your end. I think our stream is fine. We can hear you. Are you able to join us?
It sounds like your wife. I hear your wife, not you. But we'll take her update if she's using your account.
I think I could hear them both in the background. Let's see if they come back to us. I'll just mute you for the time. Oh, they've dropped out again. So maybe the internet's not so great over there in Israel. Hopefully they'll get it figured out.
I saw that you and Kaufness on your stream, that you and Kaufness were both kind of surprised by how hawkish Biden and the Democrats were in favor in Israel. And you were also surprised by the incompetency of the IDF. And, I was just listening to Scott Ritter and Ryan Dawson earlier today. And, Scott Ritter, said, well, the IDF are conscripts. They're not professional soldiers. And, although they're good with technology and stuff like that, but he wasn't surprised by the underperformance of the IDF. And it's very possible that the IDF is still underperforming and that the battle for Gaza will not go that well for Israel. But you had mentioned you were surprised by the underperformance of the IDF, especially October 7th, or at least Kaufness did. Are you?
I was very surprised by the incompetence of the entire Israeli security apparatus. It may well be that the Israeli security apparatus, including the Shin Bet and the IDF, is simply not particularly competent right now. Also, I was shocked at the inability of the kibbutzniks, the people in these Israeli settlements in the south, to protect themselves. And then I realized, it was pointed out to me by a friend, that these are overwhelmingly left-wing socialist peaceniks. So this massacre could never have happened with West Bank settlers. That most Jews in American political terms are on the left, because most Jews in America are Ashkenazim. And so these people in the south of Israel who were massacred overwhelmingly were on the left, were not armed, and were quite ineffective at trying to protect themselves. One of the things that would hit was a drug infested rave for peace. This is not a right-wing activity, and this massacre just would never have happened among West Bank settler types, but the kibbutzniks, the peaceniks, the Israelis in southern Israel who were slaughtered, were overwhelmingly anti-right-wing, were overwhelmingly inclined towards having as much empathy for the Palestinians as possible, and as a result, they were not prepared to defend themselves.
Okay, well, Aaron? But I mean, they also took over the military bases. Like, they wiped out the 2 battalions of the Golani Brigade, however those are, and so it wasn't just the kibbutzniks that appeared to be incompetent or underperformed, but it was 8 military bases that also, and like, God forbid, if you see those videos, it's a lot of those are like Hamas guys on like motorcycles and flip-flops that took out some of the best technology bases. I mean, people focus on the civilian casualties, God forbid, but you also have to put into perspective that they did overtake 8 military bases, including like the 2 battalions of the Golani brigades that are supposedly like elite units.
Yeah, I mean, the IDF response was absolutely pathetic. It took 10 hours in some places to get IDF troops on the ground. The first significant number of Israeli troops didn't arrive for 7 hours. So the Hamas fighters were just far more competent than the Israeli soldiers. By and large, were massacred. They were asleep. They weren't prepared in any way. They weren't competent. They were just slaughtered because they certainly went up to the task of just elementary, just defending their own base, let alone defending the civilians who are their responsibility to keep safe. The Palestinians poured in, and by and large, they slaughtered soldiers who were in bed and just completely undefended. And they attacked, Israeli base and police base after police base. And that was the most shocking thing to me, was the incompetence of the Israeli security apparatus.
I saw the videos going around on Telegram of that. They were pretty brutal indeed. I've been very careful not to entertain any of the conspiracy theories about this, but what you were just saying, Luke, the level of incompetence, I think, where we can at least say you can see why it has given rise to conspiracy theories about the claim that Israel may have let this happen. How do you feel about those kinds of things?
Well, among my right-wing friends, they're just absolutely convinced that there were Israeli traitors, because Hamas did have all the protocols for the IDF. They knew exactly how the IDF would respond. They had maps, they had codes, they had everything they needed to do this job. It was as though they had the playbook for the IDF, and they just went ahead and operated with complete knowledge of how the IDF would respond to them. They had the plans, they had the layout, they had everything that they needed to mount an effective response. So I'm not conspiratorial. I would attribute these type of things to incompetence. I have no sympathy for the view that 9/11 was an inside job, and I don't believe that October 7 was an inside job. I believe it was the result of incompetence, and even though I have sympathy for Netanyahu's court reorganization plan, you can be right in what you want to do, but if the results of what you want to do are to tear apart society and thereby weaken its defenses, thus, allowing a massacre like this to be happen, it doesn't happen. It doesn't really matter if you're right. And so I see this as primarily incompetence, and this primarily reflects on Bibi Netanyahu and the Shin Bet and the entire Israeli Defense Force, just completely unprepared and incompetently led. And I'm not conspiratorial. I just attribute this to incompetence.
Dooovid, have you any further thoughts on the conspiracy angle that you've heard people pushing? It's wild out there. Lots of people are very convinced of this. Now, we know this always happens in any case where these things happen. Any further thoughts on it, Dooovid?
Yeah, I've analyzed the possibilities, and it's mostly based on like a Q bono, who benefits analysis, and the claim that either Netanyahu himself politically or right-wing factions in Israel that want to carry out some form of forced expulsion. And there's no direct evidence whether there was incompetence traders within Israel. That's, God forbid, reasonably likely that at least information was given to Hamas that they shouldn't have had. But yeah, I think Luke is. I'd agree. It's basically incompetence, and unfortunately, considering that the IDF has demonstrated some levels of incompetence, that if that's likely to continue for the ground invasion, I know Israel's already announced like 20 casualties. I've seen videos of at least posted in the last few days from semi-credible sources of likely tens of more Israelis that have been killed just in the last since the ground incursion. And most of the military experts I'm hearing from are predicting tens of thousands of Israeli casualties in the ground invasion. I at some point, like a few weeks ago, heard a top Israeli military official estimate 10,000 casualties, but now I can't find that and think Israel is hiding it, and even possibly that Israel hasn't released the amount of casualties just in the last few days. But I mean, how do you feel about that, Luke? If you're saying the incompetencies, what do you feel about Israel waging this war? Or you feel well, you can't do anything about it; they have to do it, whether they're incompetent or not. And if they take those losses, tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers, that's what they have to do with even if they are incompetent.
Well, it's something and someone can be incompetent in one area and competent in another. So right now, the indications are that they're attacking Gaza in a competent fashion with very little loss of life. So it looks to me right now as though the IDF and security apparatus was incompetent with regard to October 7, but since October 8, the way they've operated has struck me as competent.
Yeah, so a lot of these things aren't confirmed, and the IDF generally is very slow to release information. So, like Ukraine-Russia war, so there's a lot of military mappings. A lot of the internet people, even like Jackson Hinkle, but more reliable ones like Mario Nuffel or Venegrad, that even lean pro-Israel, have released footage of what appears to be Israeli tanks being destroyed. Another one where there's like a bomb that dropped on like from a drone of like 10 Israeli soldiers. There was another claim that infantry whole unit of 10 people was wiped out in one RPG, or shoulder-mounted rocket launcher, whatever. And so Israel has been releasing casualty numbers and names regularly, but if it's possible that those numbers are actually significantly higher, and the worry, like, it's mandatory military service, so it could be like Ukraine, where they forced a draft, and Israel will be in this bad position where they're waging an unwinnable war and are just going to be a meat grinder where they're sending people in to die. And like, God forbid, because like me and Luke in this situation of being old bachelors was thinking like, oh, God forbid, like maybe me and Luke will actually have a chance of getting a Jewish girl, because like tens of thousands of Jewish boys will, like Israeli boys, will be killed, and there'll be excess of tens of thousands of Jewish girls.
I hadn't considered that aspect.
Wow,
of
I
it.
never considered that angle.
Yeah. Do you think this will increase your chances, David?
Well, I mean, God forbid, like, I just saying, like, the thought ran in the back of my mind, but I was saying that if you just look at the reality that it's likely a meat grinder, and Israel might keep on sending people into Gaza, and you could have 10 to 50 Israelis dying every day, and then maybe Hamas, God forbid, gets a really big score and kills a few hundred Israelis one day, and it could be like Bakhmut or one of these Russian battles where it's just a meat grinder with because there's 30,000 Hamas militants. So even if you're watching the Jewish news, like, oh, they killed like 130 Hamas militants yesterday, but there's still like 29,800 more of them. And even if it's a 10-to-1 kill number, that's still going to be 3,000 Israeli soldiers lost. And the experts are predicting much more. And the question of the competency.
Look at this Israeli incompetency. It took me like 40 minutes to get on this stream. This is completely because Israelis are so incompetent with everything we do. What's up, guys?
Made it, dude. Finally, you made it. Welcome to the
We got our
stream.
man on the ground.
I don't know who this Aaron Amihud guy is. I'm Mr. Pigger, and I brought my wife,
dude.
Mrs. Pigger, here, and she is an actual Israeli. I don't know. I've been here for 20 years. I can't figure out this country at all. But I think if you guys have any questions about what's going on and you want a true Israeli perspective, I think my wife can do the trick.
Yeah, lay it on us. Let's hear the Israeli perspective.
If you just want the floor to say whatever you want first, and then I'm sure we could pound you with questions.
No, you start with a question. I only answer questions.
Okay, I got a question. How confident are you in Israel's leadership, both politically and militarily?
Well, that's a good one. You start with a heavy one first. We have some problems, as you guys know. It looks like I've been listening to you all this time, and looks like you know our inner business quite well. So we have a leadership problem, and Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to avoid this problem for the last 14 years. I think the bigger plan was for him. He tried to make us like this big, strong, economic, successful country, and from a place of strength, that we will try to make some, like peace agreements, like now the one that's going to be with Saudi Arabia, and like to pass above the heads of Palestinians to make the issue of Palestinians like a non-issue. And it was quite successful till now. But this problem was like growing under us the whole time. We only completed building a $2.5 billion fence in 2021 between us and Gaza, and we thought that we can go on buying us time. It's not a stupid strategy, I think.
Yeah, it's kicked the can down the road.
Yeah.
And that only goes for so long, I guess.
Right. But now it's as if a divine force forced this on us. It's a war that we've been forced to. I don't think there could have been another leadership other than Netanyahu that would have done something any different, because prime ministers came in and out from the left side of the political map as well, and they didn't do such big maneuvers. The policy was always the policy that we're not going to attack them, that we're going to let them grow under our supervision. And now it's coming down to, that's it. You have to take care of it. So now you're asking me how competent I am that my government is going to take care of it. I'm not so sure. There's a lot of international pressure that's growing every day. And if you're a non-Jew and you're looking at what's happening in the Middle East and you're going, okay, so they slaughtered 1,400 people, but now Israel already killed 8,000 or whatever the number is, and the numbers are going to grow every day. Every day that's going to pass, the numbers are going to get bigger. We're going to kill more and more people within them. What you define innocent, I don't define them like that, because the innocent children of 2014 are the murderers of October 7th. So the pressure is going to grow on us, and I'm not sure we're going to complete the job this time around. I'm not so sure. Did I answer?
Yeah. And how competent do you think the IDF is with the mammoth task? Do you think that they are up to the task of conquering Hamas and
Yes.
keeping Hezbollah at bay?
I'm not a military expert, but I'll tell you this. We have the strength. We have the military strength. We don't have the right policies, because during the last 20 years, a lot of progressive opinions entered the army. And instead of turning it into like a fighting army that wants to win, we've turned into some sort of an education program for equality between men and women. You know, all these ideas. I shouldn't be like saying all these things. And we do not have the right orders, and commanders that were giving the right orders were like being kept at minor places, like they wouldn't let them get to the top of the army pyramid. They're not the decision makers, and the decision makers kept on adopting these policies. Now you're fighting still according to the Geneva conventions, whatever agreements, but you're fighting here with animals, and they don't play by the rules. So as long as we're still playing by some rules here, we're not going to get the job done. But if you're asking me, the IDF has the technology? Yes. Do we have the strength? Yes. Can we do this in 2 days? Probably yes. But the way we're going about it now is trying to buy us more time. To buy us more time from the world.
And what's the sense of unity? Is there still a sense of unity? Are Israelis being nicer to each other?
Are you talking about like us, the civil
Yes.
atmosphere? I
Yes.
think the civil atmosphere is becoming more great every day. People are volunteering in all sorts of programs. A lot of leftists are being reconsidering their views. They're shocked. I don't know why they're shocked, because like to me it was always obvious. And yes, people are being kinder, nicer. The biggest dispute that was going on here for the last year, yes Bibi, no Bibi, is kind of tossed aside. I think a lot of people are understanding that at the end of this, we will reconsider what you want to do, not only with Bibi, but with, this whole government, the top of the army. Because as far as Bibi says, a day before, the night before, he was told, he was giving like this report from the Shabak, you call it the Shin Bet, I don't know why. And all the security forces were telling him that Hamas is not going to do any attack, and the face of Hamas is for peace, for like, not exactly peace, but like continue what they have. And a lot of people are going to have to stand on trial to report to committees. The public wants to know every single thing. I also heard you before when we were having technical trouble. I heard you like raising this thing of conspiracy. So the first couple of days, like September 8th and September 9th, we were like, the people of Israel we were like so shocked, like what the hell happened here, that a lot of conspiracy theories were rising. And we still don't have time for like the committee to start investigating what went wrong. And there's a saying in Judaism that says, if it's Saddam or Chelem, you guys know what Chelem is, like stupidity?
Yeah.
It's not 99.9% of the times it's not Saddam, it's Chelem, it's stupidity. So I think we'll be wise to assume that it is stupidity and not, I find it hard to believe. I read all the conspiracy theories. Believe me, I'm following these guys. I was just talking to my husband about it, and I don't think it. I don't think it's a conspiracy that happened here. It's just us assuming for so long and being addicted to the peace and quiet and to the economic situation that was so flourishing here in Israel. We just got addicted to living well. And people want to assume that the enemy also wants to live well. And it's a dream. And it exploded.
I had two main questions I wanted to focus on. One of them was the longer outcome and the sentiment of Israelis about the possibility of expulsion, and the other is the informants of the level of casualties that are expected to occur, meaning